So recently some of the Resident Evil games went on sale on Steam, so pretty much all of them were on sale apart from the remake for Resident Evil 4 because that came out recently and they're still charging £50 for it, so I said no. Anyway, I was searching through the endless list of Resident Evil games, and like seriously, there are way too many of these games for Capcom's own good. How many do you ask? Well, let me just do a bit of a... 30 games! Christ, Capcom, give it a rest. Anyway, I searched for a bit and was torn between 3 games. Resident Evil 0, which I decided not to play because everyone hates it. Resident Evil 7, but I didn't go for that one in the end because it's a spooky game and I'm a massive pussy. So I eventually said, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to rebuy Resident Evil 4, the 2005 version to be precise, despite me already owning it on the Wii. I am a moron. And I only intended to play this game for a few hours, relive a bit of my favourite game of all time, and then put the game down and go back to recording footage for games I may or may not review. But, yeah, this didn't really go to plan. I've been playing this game non-stop for 3 days. I need psychiatric help. This just goes to show how good Resident Evil 4 is. It's so well designed, so fun, and such a fresh spin on the series that it suckered me in and I nearly completed the game by accident. But why is Resident Evil 4 so good after all of these years? Well, let me get into that. So, Resident Evil 4 was released in 2005, at a time when the Resident Evil franchise was starting to lose steam. Many aspects of Resident Evil 3 felt like a team of developers grasping at straws, like that whole choose your own adventure thing that would, slightly affect the story, that thank goodness the remake did away with that because it was a dumb feature then, it was going to be even dumber feature now. In stepped in Shinji Mikami, the creator of the original Resident Evil PlayStation 1 game, and they started development for a next-gen Resident Evil game. So many versions of RE4 were developed. One was such a departure from the series, and it was less of a survival horror, more of a hack and slash, that it was rebranded as another series and it became Devil May Cry. And my god, the castle level inside the first Devil May Cry looks exactly the same as the castle level in Resident Evil 4. Seriously, corporate needs you to spot the difference between these two images. And after a few other scrapped versions, we eventually got the third person over the shoulder shooter that we all know and love. RE4 was one of the first games to pioneer third person shooting, and by god does it feel like it. The controls are the only aspect of RE4 that haven't aged well. So you have tank controls, so it isn't your average Uncharted or God of War control scheme with movement on the left stick and camera on the right. RE4 is controlled entirely on the left stick. You cannot move and shoot, instead you have to stop dead in your tracks and aim using the left analog stick, with your bullets being guided using a red dot. Although this is not such a bad thing, as the game is deliberately designed around these limited controls. Enemies attack you one by one and often stick together in large huddles, so weapons like the shotgun that have very large spreads can clean out large groups of enemies. The controls are slightly strange at first, but after a while you'll get used to them and you'll be mowing down more Spanish people than Sir Francis Drake. All the guns handle great and have very nice sounds, my favourite of which is the Red 9, that has a very nice shooting noise. Plus, the feedback of the guns like the shotgun are extremely satisfying and often results in heads going pop. Yeah, I should probably mention this game is quite violent for a 15. The graphics have aged extremely well. No matter what version of the game you play, it still looks really nice. Most of the character models look better than people I see on the street. I recommend playing the PC version of this game as it runs at 1080p at a buttery smooth 60fps with HD textures, which are always a nice addition. The game is also extremely well optimised. I mean, my rig isn't the greatest, but it still ran amazingly, which it really bloody should considering how old it is. I think I'm just salty for Fear being capped at 30 frames a second, which also came out in 2005. Guess it was the year for horror action games where the enemies should fear you. The story of RE4 is spectacularly silly. It's honestly one of the best stories in RE history. So RE4 is a horror game, but it can be honestly hilarious in some places. The thing about the story is that it can have you pissing yourself from laughter 1 minute but then shitting yourself in fear the next, and it executes this masterfully. Each character is really well characterised, some of the highlights being Ramon Salazar, Lord Sadler, and of course Leon S. Kennedy himself. The only character I don't like is Ashley, the reason why you got sent to this hellhole because you're trying to save her. I mean, she's relatively good at staying alive, staying behind Leon and ducking whenever you start aiming. God, she isn't half annoying with half of her voice lines. All in all, Resident Evil 4 is still incredible all these years later. I implore you to play the original before playing the remake. It is honestly the definitive Resident Evil experience, with the perfect blend of action, horror and comedy. Shame that Resident Evil will never be able to top itself, because this game was just so goddamn good, and this may be the reason why Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6 were shite, because it just couldn't be topped. So, despite the controls, I'm giving Resident Evil 4 a complete deserved 9 out of 10. Still an amazing game all these years later, with good graphics, great story and exquisite optimisation, only slightly brought down by lacklustre controls that were mapped seemingly at fucking random.